And so what's happening now with the Steelers, because they've got a coach, so now they need a quarterback. So what's Aaron Rodgers going to do? We don't know. Presumably he will make a decision here within the next month or so. But then you start hearing stuff like, hey, let's bring in Malik Willis. Okay, on the surface, I'm thinking, all right, okay, Malik Willis, he filled in. He comes in a good system in Green Bay where they have they have an offensive system that works. And so Jordan Love gets hurt. Malik Willis comes on, and, hey, he looks pretty good. But then you hear where somebody presses, and I don't know who comes up with these values, but again, out there, it's the the Ray Fittipaldos of the world but although Ray doesn't do this kind of stuff, other people do. The salary people, they project what kind of a contract is he going to get. $40 million. Okay, that's you may as well take Malik Willis and just crumple up for you. Are you kidding me? No way. No way. Even over 2 years. No. I mean, come on. Give me a break. So then we go to mock drafts. And several people, because, hey, Steelers need a quarterback. They don't have a long-term answer at quarterback. Ty Simpson from Alabama. He doesn't have a whole lot of experience as a college quarterback. He's inconsistent along with that relative inexperience. No. The Steelers have so many other needs. No. And then, of course, that brings us back to who the Steelers do have on their roster, and that's Will Howard. And am I intrigued by the potential of Will Howard? Yeah. It's intriguing. And I don't cover training camp anymore, but even if I had, I wouldn't have seen any of Will Howard last year. Hasn't really done anything. And he did reappear at Steelers practices toward the end of the season, but hasn't done anything really. And yet people are not banking on, but intrigue is a good word. You're intrigued by it. You're curious about it. But there's no way to entrust the starting quarterback job on a team like the Steelers, which is going to finish 9-8 or 10-7, maybe 7-10. But you don't want to bring in a team that's, they're not close to winning a Super Bowl, but obviously they're not even close to winning a playoff game, apparently, although they did come within 3 quarters of winning one before they got blown out in the fourth quarter against Houston. But they're not really close to winning a playoff game if you go by the final scores. They are close to making the playoffs because, they either do or they don't, and they don't finish under 500. So, they're right in the middle. They're close to something. But whatever it is, do you want to put Will Howard in that position, unseen, untried, untested at the NFL level? No, probably not. Now, I've said for a while now that I'd like to see what Mason Rudolph can do with a real offensive coordinator. And certainly Mike McCarthy qualifies as a real offensive coordinator, a guy that knows NFL offenses. I would love to see what Mason Rudolph could do. And I'm to the point where forget about drafting a quarterback. Hey, you got Will Howard as your developmental quarterback. Now, maybe you want to bring in another guy as a backup. Okay. Even though Mason Rudolph projects as a backup. But I would really like to see what Mason Rudolph could do with an up-and-coming offensive line, with a real offensive coordinator, draft a couple of receivers, get rid of Jonnu Smith and use the tight ends the way they should be used with Darnell Washington and Pat Freiermuth. Use Freiermuth the right way. Use him in the slot. I think Mason Rudolph wouldn't be too bad. And the Steelers have other needs on both sides of the ball, even on defense, where they pay more for their players than any other team has the last few years. I think Mason Rudolph would be pretty good with a real offensive coordinator and a team around him that could support him. And to me, that's worth more of a shot than some of these other things that you see out there. On defense, I'd still see what I could get for TJ Watt, although at this point, even though I would have traded him a couple of years ago, but and that was even knowing without they had with Nick Herbig. At any rate, they've got some depth at that. You guys all know this stuff. I mean, they've got some depth at that position. See what they can get for him. But at this point in his career, he's probably maybe a second-round draft pick, maybe not. But I would see what the market is for him and see what you could do. But other than that, they've got some places. And, Patrick Queen, I know that's something we can talk about as the offseason progresses. But, and I'm curious and intrigued, if I can use that word again, on the defensive side of the ball, what they'll do with a different defensive coordinator who may come in with his own ideas. With the roster he inherits, he's probably most likely, I can't imagine him deviating from the 3-4 defense, the base. But how often is any defense in its quote-unquote base defense these days in the NFL? I mean, heck, half the time, a team's nickel is its base defense because of the personnel that the other offenses present opposite those defenses. So I'm interested in that, some fresh eyes, some fresh blood on the coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball. They might do some nice things with these guys. I mean, they're getting paid enough. They should be able to come through with it. But like I said, there are decisions that need to be made in terms of how much bang you get for your buck with guys like Patrick Queen, Jalen Ramsey, and stuff like that. Deshaun Elliott comes back if he stays healthy all year, which obviously he didn't last year. His absence, I think, really affected the defense. And you get him back, I think that helps an awful lot of things on defense. But you got to make decisions. You want to extend Patrick Queen. You want to let him go. I mean, that's kind of split down the middle on that. Same deal with Jalen Ramsey. Do you restructure these guys? Whatever. But there are decisions that have to be made. But to me, in terms of getting back to the draft real quick, is that you need receivers and you need another cornerback. Now, cornerbacks are really not easy to find, to the point where people always say, well, what do you use a first-round draft pick on? What do you want to use a draft pick on? Well, it all depends on who's there relative to who might be there in the second round and all that kind of stuff. How deep is a particular position? Wide receivers have shown to be a deeper position than others. But, using the first-round draft pick on a wide receiver, I think would be smart. But if there is a cornerback available, then would that make more sense? Yeah, and it's even gotten to the point where, and I'm forgetting about quarterback. I mean, forget about that. That there might be a guard available later in the first round at number 21. You could actually probably, well, not that the Steelers need any more draft picks, but you could actually trade down and get a really good guard. And you can see the best guards that the Steelers have had in recent years, including David DeCastro, was fairly late in the first round. Alan Faneca, Hall of Famer, late first-round pick. You can get a great value at a guard. That's why I always thought guards and safeties in the first round are actually great value picks, even though people say, well, you don't have to waste a pick on a safety or a guard. Well, you can get 10 or 15 years sometimes out of those guys with first-round picks.